Hello, everyone. Welcome to TMBS 154. I'm Matt Leck. With me, Alicia Brooks and David Griscom. Tonight on the program, we're going to be rejoined by Malaika Jabali, who's going to be talking to us. She was on the ground for an epicenter of right-wing reaction in Kenosha, Wisconsin. We're also going to be talking about the importance of local politics. Also, Albert Corado, an activist with no Olympics, will talk to us about some more, mendacious and murderous police in Los Angeles. He'll be talking to Alicia Brooks later in the program. I think that'll be enough for tonight. Alicia and David, how are you guys doing?
Doing all right, brother. Just good to see y'all.
Yeah.
Doing okay.
Yeah. Tonight, David, what's your commentary on for us?
Today, we're going to talk about how there is no ethical form of capitalism and why we need to merge the moral critique with the structural one.
Boom.
Okay, I think I'm prepared for that sort of message. Actually, I'm primed for
you thought that was what was going to come tonight. You had an inkling.
Yeah.
All right.
Are we ready?
I'm ready.
Set the table.
Yeah. So the moral critique, it has to be merged with a structural understanding of these systems. This is because we can talk about how unfair and unjust and how evil these systems are, but until we get to the root of them, we're just talking abstractly about a very concrete system, and we're not able to develop the tools that we need to be able to take it down and to move into a new system of relations with one another. For example, we know that the policing crisis can't be changed with a culture change or more training. Why is that? It's because the system of policing is used to address social problems like houselessness and poverty with brute force. It's the same kind of thing as when you hear, somebody like Joe Biden talk about, the evils of climate change or whatever, and says, an empty slogan like believe science. But then, a week later is talking about how he will not ban fracking in the United States.
Come on, man.
Having a strong moral criticism is very motivating and is very important. I think Bernie Sanders really showed the line there of talking about the evils of the system, calling out people like Jeff Bezos by name, but also making that structural criticism of capitalism. But we need to go much, much further. Capitalism is an evil system, yes, and it makes people do horrible and wicked things, and it leaves the majority of people exploited and oppressed. But we don't make that criticism because we're trying to say, let's get our bosses to be nice bosses. Let's have a nice, friendly capitalism. Because fundamentally, capitalism is incapable of meeting that basic human demand. We know things like meritocracy are false and are wrong. And I think what happened with this recent cheating scandal where you had elites basically paying for their children to get into, elite universities, even though they didn't earn that on their own merit. All of these things, like we can focus on the morality, but the people in power understand that this is a system, an economic system, and they know how to play by the rules. If everybody today across the world were paid a fair wage, equal to their labor, capitalism would collapse. Why is that? It's because capitalism is a system that is what is fundamental to capitalism is the exploitation of labor. That's why you go in to work, you create a product, your labor puts value into a product or to an activity, you get paid a wage, but that wage is not the full amount of the value that you're creating. That has to go to the people at the top. And that's why we've seen capitalism get stricter and stricter, harder and harder over the past few years, especially as all of this outsourcing has been going on so that they can pay people poverty wages, get around labor laws, anything that's trying to push back against the fundamental logic of capitalism. They're trying to undermine that because capitalism cannot function in an equitable way. I'm not saying that fighting for reforms doesn't matter. We have to fight for them. We have to fight for higher minimum wage. We have to fight for labor protections. And we have to fight against the most exploitative capitalist relations in the world. We have to do that, right? But as Richard Wolff reminds us time and time again, the ruling class is very savvy and they use every crisis as an opportunity to justify rolling back the victories that labor has won. We're at a time right now where the evil is so apparent. It's so apparent what's going on. In a world where we have an abundance of food, that there are people who are hungry. In a country like the United States, where we have abundant housing, we have enough housing to house everybody. But because of property relations, to protect the property rights and the profit of the wealthy and the property owners, we have houselessness. That's a capitalist problem. That's a capitalist created problem. And another example is the needless death in this country when healthcare is widely available. The police play a role in protecting property. The system plays a role in maintaining these kind of relations. The government plays a role in maintaining monopoly power for certain corporations. It is fundamental to capitalism, the exploitation of the many for the benefit of the few. All of these are societal failures. They're systematic. But it's not because the system is broken, but rather that it is a system that is designed to only serve the people at the very top. It is only designed to make sure that that your labor can be exploited and that you do not have access to the basic commodities that you need to survive. The inability of the United States to meet the needs of the vast majority of people in this pandemic is the direct result of this society where neoliberalism, which in many ways is the fundamental logic of capitalism, has eroded our public systems so thoroughly that even if the government wanted to help directly, the structures of welfare and public distribution of goods and services has been so decimated by years of privatization and cuts that it would have to be rebuilt from the ground up. So yes, the system is fundamentally evil, but it won't be fixed because one day Jeff Bezos is going to wake up and have a change of heart. Because even in that, fantasy society, another person, another organization, another Amazon would fill in that gap. The only way that this system is going to change is if people are able to wrest control of their workplaces and their governments and are able to radically reshape the way that we relate to one another and to the world around us. And for that, we need to cultivate and merge our moral outrage with a structural understanding and the structural logic of this global system.
Come on, man. Sorry, it's my favorite Biden.
You want to shoehorn, just to kind of the idea that a workforce that is like in deprivation is unstable for capitalism. Like the only thing that's more unstable for capitalism is a workforce that's completely like free and doesn't have to be they can't have their labor coerced. So I want to share this bit from Jared Kushner that happened last week when he's talking about how the NBA players need to shut up and dribble.
Oh, nice.
And
labor icon Jared Kushner.
Yeah, I guess I gotta make this full screen here. And you realize like this is by design. This is the reason why we haven't been given raises for 40 years, is because actually it creates a tremendous amount of problems when you can actually take your, and then Obama, of course, broke this strike, but let's just watch this.
Lives Matter issue. Does the White House support the players and the owners in this case?
Look, I think that the NBA players are very fortunate that they have the financial position where they're able to take a night off from work without having to have the consequences to themselves financially. So they have that luxury, which is great.
Lives Matter.
Bro, he just spilled the beans.
Exactly.
That's exactly it, isn't it? I mean, you have to have that system of precarity that makes people unable to stand up and fight for themselves. It's the same way that, like, if you read people, the titans of industry, why they're against things like full employment.
Right.
Even though that would generally be good for the economy, right? Because it would mean there would be more money there, everyone would be productive, all that kind of stuff. They understand that what that means is that labor then has tremendous power to stand up for itself and to leave a job that's not paying them a fair wage.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's such a good Kushner. He's just such a slime ball.
I mean, look, the problem, you hate to see these guys have power for a single day longer, but they do elaborate things in a fairly helpful way for educational purposes.
Yeah, between now and November, I guess now January, listen up. Hot tips coming in from the White House on how things actually work.
Alicia, would you like to lead us in the pitch department?
The pitch department? Hear ye, hear ye. As always, I just every week am so humbled and grateful for the community that, my brother and Matt and David and Vic and Forrest and everyone in the TMBS family has built. We are just so touched that you're all still so involved in this project. And we are able to do this work because of our patrons and the people who have joined the project since Michael's passing. Thank you. Thank you for seeing the value of the work. We are going to continue to build on Michael's, legacy and his, brilliant work that he's left for us to build on and move forward. So please, if you're able to, become a patron. It's patreon.com/TMBS. Did I do the right website? Right. Okay. My dyslexia anxiety is like, it's a dash, not a slash. So, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and please join us.
For sure. And I'd also add, I think we're going to start being able to return to releasing Sunday shows again soon. And I know this month I'm going to try to get back on doing those Griscom streams, which I always really enjoy doing those. So look out for those on the YouTube channel. But remember, you're really getting 2-to-1 content when you're signing up as 3-to-1, honestly, content when you're signing up as a patron. You get this whole main show that we put up publicly. You get the post game, where we, kick back a little bit, have a little bit more fun, a little bit less structured of a show, and we answer, Discord Q&As. We're going to start getting back. Another announcement too. I'm moving Theory Mondays to Theory Thursdays. It's going to work a little bit better with my new schedule. So there'll be another theory reading group coming up this next Thursday. And those are always a really exciting way for us all to sort of be on the same page, reading similar things. And for people who are already patrons, please reach out if there are any subjects or areas that you would like it to go into, because I'm always happy to suggest new readings or to jump into new readings with you all as well. So please come and support us at patreon.com/TMBS.
You nailed it. Might you be making these Thursday Theory Thursdays? A rebrand.
Thursday Theory Thursdays.
That's all I got.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be back with Malaika Jabali. All right, folks. Actually, Malaika will be with us in just a few minutes. Before we get to that, let's set up a little bit of this Kenosha stuff, deal with it, some of the details. So, first thing I want to say up front is whenever there's sort of just statements given by police departments in this sort of environment, I do not credit them unless they're independently corroborated. And I think, corroboration is important for all of these sorts of things, but I definitely think that's a justifiable stance to take, especially when you look at like what's happening with the Breonna Taylor case. But I mean, when you start to name them, you lose track of how widespread police mendacity is in this country. So that said, what we know so far about Jacob Blake is he's survived the shooting 7 times in the back. Paralyzed from the waist down is the early indications. There's competing narratives about whether there may have been some notion of a knife there or not. That I would say there's still a problem if you're shooting a guy 7 times in front of children.
Mm-hmm.
And his children in his car.
Right. So, that's, I think, what needs to be said there. I guess, do you have anything else you think we need to say about the actual incident that sparked all this? The other thing I want to say is we do not have a riot problem in this country. All this stuff is sparked out by very specific instances of police use of force. And right, go ahead, David.
Oh, no. I was just going to even be almost more general on this, is to say, one, the facts of the case, the excuse that they've come out, which is nonsense in the first place, to say that somebody had a knife in their car.
It's the upper Midwest.
Is absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry. I'm from the South. I'm from Texas. There is I'm not trying to threaten anybody, but like I always have a knife in the car or something like that. It's just like if you're from a certain area, that's just a typical thing to have. These kind of excuses after the fact are so clearly nonsensical.
Should I be carrying a knife? Does everyone else have a knife but me?
It's not a fighting knife. It's just like, for if I needed it for whatever.
David has a knife. Okay. No.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
No, I know.
ridiculous.
It's completely bogus. There's really nothing else to say. Like there's absolutely no excuse. This never should have happened. It's disgusting. It's terrifying. It's grotesque.
Was there something else you want to say, David, before we get to Malaika? She just joined us.
If she's ready, let's go for it.
All right. So she should be transitioning her way to from the waiting room right now, but it's writer, activist. I guess I'll wait to confirm her intro here.
The world of Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to make
Hey, y'all.
Hey, Malaika.
I'm trying to adjust my name.
I can get it for you here.
Okay. It's like super.
Gotcha.
And yeah, my iPad is really slow. I can't even turn my video on right now.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait. Here we go. Let me put my Twitter. Why is it so slow?
This is the CIA tech monopolies that are.
Yeah, honestly.
This is ridiculous. All right,
well, as she tries to get her video live, Malaika, do you still go by writer, attorney, and activist? Are you still an attorney?
Attorney. You could just say attorney and Guardian columnist is fine.
Okay, so attorney. Guardian columnist Malaika Jabali joins us. Many people will remember her from one of the all-time great TMBS episodes. It was 64, I think. TMBS 64, The Color of Economic Anxiety. She joined us to talk about the article by the same name in Current Affairs. I think one of the more important articles people could read about the election and Hillary's failure in 2016. Malaika, could you, I guess, reflect on and maybe reprise some of the lessons you learned there and I guess what you feel about, I guess, your experience in Milwaukee, both of these times, or not Milwaukee, but Wisconsin, both of these instances, and I guess what's going on there?
What I saw in 2017 when I followed up on the 2016 election were a lot of people who pretty much countered the narrative that we've been hearing in the mainstream media, which is that the only reason why Donald Trump won is because on one hand, he just appealed to a whole lot of, dispossessed white voters who flipped from Obama to Trump. And so that is true to some extent in a number of battleground states. But in Wisconsin, the white voter turnout actually declined. 100,000 fewer white people voted in 2016 than they did in 2012. And the difference between what he got over Mitt Romney was only about 700 votes. And mind you, Hillary Clinton lost that state by about 100,000 votes. So about 200,000 Democrats didn't come out in 2016 versus 2012. So while she got a loss of 200,000 votes, Donald Trump only got an increase of 700 votes over Mitt Romney. So to me, Wisconsin was a little bit different from the narratives of Michigan and Pennsylvania, and everybody kept lumping them in together. So what you saw was that 88,000 of those votes were Black people who actually stayed home. Wisconsin went red for the first time in 30 years for a presidential election. And when you talk to those Black people, when you talk and you look at the neighborhoods, there is a lot of economic anxiety amongst Black people too. So white people stayed home, Black people stayed home. A lot of people stayed home. It wasn't that there was just kind of this onslaught of, fascism and bigotry and all of that, at least in Wisconsin. And there is a lot of deindustrialization that affects people across race in Wisconsin. So, I could go on and on about that, but go ahead.
On that, I noticed I was just briefly looking at Kenosha just overhead, and there's a giant part in the middle of it where it's like a Kenosha auto plant. And it's like, oh, some manufacturing in Kenosha. And actually, you've come to find that shut down in 2010. Like, I know Kenosha's between Milwaukee and Chicago. I think it's technically in some sort of Chicago accounting area, right? I'm not sure about that, but basically between Milwaukee and Chicago. I guess what's your do you have any the economic situation of Kenosha that might be underlying that all this is setting for?
There is a lot of poverty that's happening in that region, just in the Midwest generally. So I'll just kind of step back a little bit and say that the Midwest is the worst place for Black people to live in the country. If you just look at economic indicators, Wisconsin and Minnesota tend to jockey for first and second position. And in that area, if you're looking at Wisconsin, Kenosha is only about maybe 45 minutes outside of Milwaukee, about an hour outside of Chicago. And so even though there are, it's a suburban area, suburban to rural, and there's industry there, if you look at it, it's different from Milwaukee, where in a lot of areas, factories have been abandoned. But in quite a few areas of Kenosha, there's still active small businesses. And if you drive into it, a lot of these logistics centers, distribution centers, but kind of peeling behind that, there is still poverty, there is still incarceration. Wisconsin overall has the highest incarceration rate of Black men in the country. And there are a lot of, issues with working class people across race who aren't getting their issues addressed.
Yeah, you mentioned on Pushback with Aaron Mate and over the weekend, Philander Castile's girlfriend was actually made the pilgrimage to the protest. Can you talk a little bit, I guess there's a consciousness among Black people in the upper Midwest that this is, I think, a ground zero of a racist reaction. Yeah, for
sure. I definitely think so. And when you look at some of the things that are, if you just kind of look at the Pavlov's hierarchy of needs, people are dealing with terrorism that is hitting, terrorism from police that is affecting whether they can live from one day to the next. It's very violent. It is very confrontational, and it's very immediate. And so in both Minnesota and in Wisconsin and Iowa, they actually have the highest rates of incarceration and the highest kind of disparity. So there is this kind of sense that, okay, this is a unique problem with police terrorism. If you just go back to Michael Brown, that was Ferguson, Missouri. If you go to Tamir Rice, that was Ohio. If you go to John Crawford, that was Ohio. If you go to Laquan McDonald, that's in Chicago. So Ferguson, obviously, I said Michael Brown. So if you look at this whole region, people feel it, on a regular basis. And these are things that have been filmed recently. So it's almost like these public lynchings that are happening in these communities.
Yeah, like the contrast, like I think what we're sort of the reality we're living now with some of the images I think you included in your The Color of Economic Anxiety piece, where you have, I think the Black Parade, like a whole bunch of balloons, a bunch of black bus drivers in front of their bus proudly. It seems like the kind of, I don't know, like the grand opening, grand closing of the Midwest. And I find it, as somebody who's from North Dakota, I found it extremely depressing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it was kind of that swift because these families moved there like in a very short period of time. For, Wisconsin in particular, there are some areas of the Midwest where people have been migrating there, like Minnesota, since like the 1910s, 1920s. Wisconsin was a little bit late in the timeline. And around the time that people were thriving and arriving there is when the manufacturing industry went bust. And Black men were disproportionately employed in the manufacturing industry. So it's not like they even had a safety net. It's not like they had like savings or houses that they, had time to buy because they were segregated from them almost immediately. So there was no safety net. So once those, the factories offshored, went to the suburbs, there was like nothing left. And so what replaced the jobs were prisons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think the formula is just, I think we've all been sort of, I mean, at least, like there's a lot of academic books and stuff we've all familiar with, but I mean, we're at the point of history where this is just what's happened, and it's very depressing. I want to play. You were there when Rittenhouse, shot 3 people, killing 2 of them. I want to play this clip from a Daily Caller journalist who was on the scene, where he catches a protester in Wisconsin complaining about Rittenhouse, basically menacing them with his firearm, because I think there's a lot of invested in, I think, laundering Rittenhouse's image here. And right. This isn't the only report. I think it was USA Today. I'll post it, but somebody did a really good rundown of different people that were like, stay away from this guy. He's a problem. But here's this image.
I got a whole bunch of trial trainers.
Here it is. So he's offering them medical, and this guy saying, "You're the one that was just telling us to get out of the car."
I remember you. You said, "Get out the car." Yeah. Anybody need medical?
So yeah, Malaika, what's your reaction to this Rittenhouse stuff?
I heard the shots go off. I saw these armed vigilantes there all day. I saw Black Lives Matter protesters trying to de-escalate all afternoon. So what it makes clear to me is, as we all know, there are 2 systems of liberties in this country where somebody can walk around armed, menace people with this armed rifle, an assault rifle, cross state lines to do this, knowing that, there's already tension in the country, and instead he can be heralded as a hero after killing 2 people. You compare that to somebody like Trayvon Martin, who was actually, stalked for who knows how long, but for several minutes, not just, a quick, somebody was approaching him, but he was being stalked and intimidated and harassed for several minutes. And so when he decides to use self-defense by just punching somebody, his perpetrator gets left off the hook. And we know, just looking at history, that this could go either way. Mm-hmm. When there's so much video evidence out there, there's so much information about his background that it should not be this unclear and nebulous. But when you're living in a world of white supremacy, these double standards hold.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at the way he was coordinated with the cops. He was getting water with them. They didn't even arrest him right away, and they said they were happy to have his kind. They were coordinated with those militia guys, right? Like, I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
And actually, like, because if you were there on the ground, I've heard reports too that people were saying that the police were sort of pushing the protesters and the movement into areas that they knew that these militia or vigilante characters were sort of camped out at.
Yeah, that's what I heard. And I was staying somewhere. So I was in the park. There's this park called Civic Center Park. It's almost like, the battleground where everything was taking place. And I was there when the cops arrived. I was there when the armed vehicles, the ones that you end up seeing in the video that let him off after he had just shot and killed 2 people. They started to push protesters out of the park and kind of into the corner on what was Sheridan Road, which is where he killed people, or where he killed that last gentleman. And they were pushing them further and further down Sheridan Road. And so I saw with my own eyes the barricade of cops that were filling up across the street and pushing the protesters away from the park, down the corridor, and throwing tear gas to get them out of like little corners and alleys. I got tear gas from the room where I was in because it just was floating up, out into the buildings. And so I felt tear gas enter my room. So I would not be surprised if this actually, it rings true based on investigation, because that's the exact direction that I saw them pushing in. And then, maybe 30 minutes to an hour after that is when I heard the shots fired.
And for anybody who thinks, if somehow happened across this page and wants to give the police the benefit of the doubt on this, I'd like to play a clip from Kenosha Sheriff David Beth in 2018. And this is responding to a case of some shoplifters who got in a chase.
There's some people that aren't worth saving. We need to build warehouses to put these people into it and lock them away for the rest of their lives. Let's put them in jail. Let's stop them from truly, at least some of these males going out and getting 10 other women pregnant and having small children. Let's put them away. At some point, we have to stop being politically correct. And I don't care what race, I don't care how old they are. If there's a threshold that they cross, these people have to be warehoused. No recreational time in the jails. We put them away.
So yeah, if that guy's not afraid to be politically correct, I guess, as he says.
Oh yeah, bold of him, bold choice.
One other final thing. I know he hadn't seen that. That is shocking. That guy should probably be forced from office, I would have thought. I would also like to get your thoughts. I saw you tweet about the attitudes towards Black Lives Matter protests, and I think the media's responsibility toward this. I want to share this graph, sort of approval. It showed an initial spike in approval for BLM after particularly the Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery videos, and then how that support is whittled, and what you think is responsible for this this sort of backtrack we've seen in this. I'm showing the graphics now. So how do you think the media is responsible? Do you think the media is responsible for this, or do you think this is just a reflection of the country?
I think both, it's a both and situation. I think there are multiple factors involved. I think anytime that you have like an immediate tragedy where, people could see the visual evidence of it, where, an unarmed man was being killed, I think you're going to have, support more broadly, just naturally. I think there's also, that's a very tenuous kind of alliance where Black people, we weren't all just like, okay, I think this is definitely, the turning point in white popular opinion. I think it was more so of cautious optimism and an understanding that, okay, maybe that this could be a move, but it's not necessarily like this is permanent. And that comes from just a history of just knowing how popular opinion has waned, even with somebody like Martin Luther King, who in 1963, before the March on Washington, or 1962, when there are polls of popular opinion, white people said that Black people had gone too far. This was before the Civil Rights Act. This was before the 68 Act. This was before MLK was assassinated. So I think we always understood that connection would be tenuous. At the same time, it does not help when you have a media apparatus that consistently conflates protest with violence, or even looting with violence. Like that's a terminology that some academics use. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about people throwing rocks at a courthouse and breaking glass, you cannot conflate that with somebody taking an assault rifle across state lines, or whether he got it from his friend in Wisconsin or not, taking an assault rifle and stalking people with it and killing them. Like, those two things cannot be conflated. But in the eyes of our media, these things are the same. In the eyes of an administration that gets coverage 24/7, these things are the same. And so we have these double standards when it comes to white protest versus black protest. And in order to battle that, one of those battlegrounds is through the media.
Yeah, I think it's really terrifying in the context of this election, too. You look at the way that the right is portraying a lot of these things, like Portland as a war zone, despite most of those arrests are misdemeanors for like failing to comply, graffiti, vandalism. There's some assaults and like possibly one homicide. Like Portland is going to be probably one of the safer cities despite that protest related stuff. But it's become this, we need to send in DHS to, and I mean, I think it's really terrifying with Bill Barr talking about these activists that are going from protest to protest now, because I'm worried he is talking about like BLM people who are, you're going to go from Minneapolis to Milwaukee because it's basically the same struggle you're fighting. Exactly.
Yeah. And people have a right to do that. I will say what's interesting, and I did not discover this until recently, the 1968 Housing Act arose from a lot of this urban unrest after both King was assassinated in 1967, just because of, similar conditions. And within the Housing Act, you have an anti-riot provision because they knew that a lot of this, more confrontational protest was coming out of lobbying to change the housing law. And so they put within the Housing Act a provision about rioting. And so if the government would have to look at the text precisely, but if there's reason to think that somebody was crossing state lines because of rioting, then those people could be convicted. So, we have an entire federal system that works against people who are really just asking for very basic things. My life matters the same as other people's. My housing choices should not be limited by, racism, and I should be able to live wherever I want to. If you're looking at, the 1968 Fair Housing Act and all the uprisings around that, these are very basic things, but we're acting like it's so left wing and so out of left field. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this comes from being in a right-wing country that looks at any sort of progress for people or any sort of equality or basic things like, paying people's rent as radical. And so we're always going to have this fight with the media, with the corporate media, as long as we live in a right-wing country and we don't do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wisconsin's example is very depressing in this case because you had the big protests in Madison, and then that led to the reaction that had Scott Walker into power, and it's a depressing circle. David, I think you want to lead us in a discussion of local politics, or do you have some more?
Well, yeah, but as a segue, before we jump to there, what is the kind of political situation and the social movement situation right now in Kenosha in response to everything that's happened over the past week or so?
Yeah, I had to limit my reporting because I'm actually on a different assignment in Atlanta. From what I understand, there are ongoing protests. While I was there are people coming down from Milwaukee. There's like a very active protest movement and allies who are supporting different activists in Kenosha. I do plan on going back very soon, but I think for the most part, you're going to have people who are still going to be focused on, how do you help the people who are being targeted? How do you help protesters? There was a group called Riot Kitchen that was out there. I believe they're originally from Seattle. How do you allow people to still protest despite all of this? And I think they're going to continue protesting as long as they can. And a lot of these people are from Wisconsin, either nearby Racine or Milwaukee. And they're just there to edify the message that Kenosha activists are trying to send.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that same kind of subject, I wanted to ask you sort of generally about, the power of local movements in general, because we're seeing in this moment right now, this political moment, specifically with, Black Lives Matter protests, and also the failure of the federal government and most state governments to respond adequately to coronavirus too. a real focus from a lot of people who are doing incredible work on the local level to try to take control of their communities, and support their neighbors, and all of those crucial battles that are right in front of you. And I was just sort of wondering if you want to talk at all about the power of local movements and what you think the path forward is with that.
It's powerful, and it's also relevant. I work in city government, and there are so many lobbying campaigns and so many of our kind of grassroots organizations that don't even know how the process works. So we'll have, folks like Airbnb or Uber, like when they want to pass a law, or Amazon, when they want to sell us something or pass a law, like they know which officials to contact. They have lobbying groups that are calling us on a regular basis, trying to set meetings with different like supervisors. And so I think it's really important for grassroots activists to really understand how that works. In order to change the law, you generally need people to know what's necessary to draft it. Quiet as it's kept, these quote unquote lawmakers, for the most part, aren't the ones sitting down coming up with these ideas. They're attorneys that are drafting these things. And sometimes we get model legislation. We get a law that's already finished. If you hear, I'm sure a lot of people on the call are familiar with some of those like lobbying groups like ALEC or ALEC, ALEC, and they create model legislation and just give it to people, and legislators who just don't have a lot of time, they'll just copy and paste it and make that into a bill. So we cannot change anything without state power. I think, we have to kind of put it in perspective. Under capitalism, politics alone is not enough. Even with, progressives here and there and liberals in charge here and there, under capitalism, we are going to struggle. So I'll just take an example, Wisconsin. A lot of that was driven by manufacturing companies leaving. So when you don't have jobs, what do? The state needs to make money, and the people have fled the cities. So, imprisoning people is like a valuable system. They make money off of it. They get labor off of it. And so it's hard to change that, because the root of it is that cities don't have enough money and states don't have enough money. And so they tend to get that money off of the backs of Black and brown people. So I say all that to say that there are limits to politics, but at the same time, you cannot change the laws if you're not in any of the rooms changing the laws. So if people are lobbying for abolition, if you don't have anybody willing to pass that law, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And, one thing too is, like, I remember people last week or a couple of weeks ago, and everyone was focused on the post office. They kept on saying, well, the post office doesn't make money, neither does the police department. And I know that was coming from like a good place trying to support the police and the post office. But the argument is actually, no, the police do make money. They have a fundamental role in capitalism and using people, fundamentally to bring people into prisons to use their labor. Like, there's a reason that this system exists. But I also just wanted to add too, and I feel like you know a lot about this as well, the complete destruction of local journalism because of cuts and because it's not particularly profitable. I mean, journalism as a model is really struggling right now, even on the national level. But for those small papers that have completely folded, and then you have one person who's supposed to be running 5-6 different beats, not only do they aren't able to catch what's going on in their communities, but they're also, in the same way that ALEC is giving Congress, state representatives, pre-written bills, those people get press releases from Uber, Airbnb, and Amazon, and they essentially just copy and paste those and put that in a news article about how great these corporations are that are coming into your community. So there's a huge disconnect on the local fight too, that I think it's really important that we start focusing on a lot.
Totally. And I think, as this election made very clear, this Democratic primary, these two corporate backed parties are not going to go down without a fight, and they won't go down even with a fight. So knowing that, it's imperative that we look at issues that are affecting people kind of where they are. And so policing is a local issue for the most part. When it comes to budgets, to allocate resources to education or to healthcare, we saw with Andrew Cuomo, who cut like some Medicare or excuse me, Medicaid funding. He cut some of that in the middle of a pandemic. So a lot of this comes down to lobbying state representatives, becoming state representatives, becoming city council members, and lobbying to be city council and campaigning to be city council members. Politics is, not a panacea, but you cannot get, like I said, you can't get the policy passed if you do not have radical voices in there in the first place.
100%. And, it's also really important too, to focus on building connections between all these local groups. You look at, and I think we're going to try to do a more in-depth conversation on this in the future with some of the people on the ground, but what's happened in Austin, Texas, for example, where they were able to, fight. It's not the answer. It's not done. It's not anything like that, but they were able to fight to get, significant cuts in the police budget. They were able to fight and defeat a pretty bad DA and elect a progressive. But that only came out of the fact that there were so many different local organizations that were working on issues of houselessness, working on issues of, police violence and things like that. It didn't just come overnight because everyone woke up one day. It literally came out of, years and years and years of struggle. And it's a difficult moment right now because we have seen just such a collapse of the local and the social in a lot of these communities. I mean, people have been ripped out of public places. Social organizations have been, rapidly underfunded and, don't exist as strongly as they did in the past. I mean, this local fight is going to be crucial if we want to do any of the things that we're talking about doing, because, we can have the right argument online or whatever, but until you start getting communities of people in your neighborhood understanding what's going on and get those people organized, nothing's going to happen.
Right. And I appreciate local organizing so much because it allows people to have the kinds of intimate conversations about the system that goes beyond people just thinking about the immediacy of voting for the lesser of two evils, because we always get constrained into that. We've been doing that for decades over the past, maybe the past 50 or 60 years, having to vote for the lesser of two evils because both parties have moved towards this corporatism and appealing to kind of this technocratic voting base. So because that is what our two-party structure looks like on a national level, on a local level, that is where there's a lot of freedom to be able to say, you really don't, New York City is nothing but Democrats. New York State is nothing but Democrats. So you do not have to choose a lesser of two evils if you're just used to voting for a Democrat. There's somebody like Tiffany Caban. There's somebody like AOC. There's somebody like one of my associates and comrades, Assemblymember Charles Barron, who's a socialist in New York State Assembly. You do not have to vote for people who are not actually looking for, substantive and systemic changes, because people are out there and there's a lower barrier of entry at that level.
Yeah. And I mean, like, just on the New York example, like, I think this, like, for example, like the election of Julia Salazar and getting all these progressives and even socialists in the state government in New York, we don't have full control over anything, but like, it has changed the system, even, dealing with brokers' fees, like passing that law happened because there was a shift, because there were people who are ready to come up against the real estate lobby in this state, which is horrible and is incredibly powerful. And now, of course, they're doing all these legal challenges and, there's a big system that we have to fight against, but that wouldn't have happened if people in those communities hadn't had, the guts basically to say, we're going to go up against this machine and come after incumbents and have the courage. I mean, yeah, I think it's really important. And that's something that, I've been talking a lot with Michael about in the past few months, is really trying to make a stronger push to get people into, local organizations and really fixating on those issues, because that's the only way, in my opinion, that we're going to be able to build the groundswell that we need from election to election. Because the difficult thing is if you have progressives running for big national offices or big state offices every 4 years and you start knocking on doors, that's all well and good, but people are like, who are you? I don't know you. And that's the difficult aspect of the kind of organizing that we're trying to do, because what happens when, somebody like Bernie Sanders loses, then all of this structure can feel like it's disappeared, and all this connection that all these people had can disappear with just one candidate. And we just don't have the option to pursue that model anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And, the ability to, raise people's class consciousness, because through our political organizing, we're saying, hey, the reason why this candidate is better than that candidate is they're talking about capitalism. And well, what's capitalism? You have this system, where they're putting profit over, people's needs. They're putting profit over people. So what are some other options to that? So it allows us to engage, everyday people into thinking about systems in ways, again, that you don't get through organizing around national politics.
Exactly. Well, Malaika, I really appreciate you coming in and joining us today. I hope to talk to you again soon. It's always a good time.
Yeah, same here. And I don't know, Zoom is acting up. It is definitely the feds, because I've been getting a busy signal this whole time, and it's like not showing my face. But I also wanted to shout out to you guys too for like keeping this up. This was my first time back since Michael passed, and I know it can't be easy. It was really rough hearing about it, and just props to you guys for keeping it up.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on.
No problem, Alicia.
Nice to virtually meet you. Can't wait to meet you
Nice to virtually
person.
meet you. Yeah.
Appreciate you.
No problem.
All right. See you, Malaika.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Yeah. God, that was so wild, that video. I had not seen that.
Oh, the guy, the sheriff? Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's really, really disgusting.
I know this is like a simple analysis, but we know what the police are, right?
Yes.
We understand that. But what is so wild, I mean, I don't know. It just makes it so clear why the system is so broken and dangerous. When you see the complete lack of like real civilian control over the police force. Now, I believe that it was the sheriff, right? So that's an elected official.
Right.
But, those elections are very funky in the first place already. But you see in big cities like New York and Portland, the kind of fights that the mayors are having with the police force it's really wild to see something that's completely divorced from civilian control, literally people with guns in the streets.
The other thing, like, I just find so interesting is how we act like shocked that there's sort of like white supremacist infiltration of this thing, as if this isn't just a known part of culture. I keep bringing this up, but there's this like 2001 adaptation of Othello that takes place in London. The Metropolitan Police is headed up by a black guy, but there's a bunch of racist white cops, and they're actually Nazis. Like they actually
sounds like Alec Morse's local police department. My God, I just did something horrible.
What did you say?
I'm never going to recover from this. It's bad. I meant to say Buttigieg.
Yeah.
I'm gay racist. Live.
No.
Yeah. By the way, love Alex Morse. Vote for him and boo mayonnaise mayor.
Absolutely, go Morse. But like, this is just something we know as sort of culturally in the background. Like, oh, these guys are like a step away from being Nazis. Rittenhouse like wanting to be a cop reportedly. Well, no shit. Look who the sheriff is. Like, that's just what he's saying to a press conference. Imagine what he's saying, not in front of cameras. He apparently doesn't like PC, but I'm guessing there's a little bit of different vocabulary.
On being PC. And like the thing with Rittenhouse too is I think it's something that should be mentioned. This is somebody who's gone into those kind of youth police outreach programs. This is somebody who went and, I don't know exactly what the system that he participated in, the project that he participated in. It's one of these things like, come and see what it's like to be a police officer. I mean, this is somebody who wasn't just watching from afar, but had actually been invited in too. And it's not an accident.
Not at all. Not at all.
So should we?
Well, on that note, which way do you guys want to go?
I'd love to have Albert come on if that's
ready.
Yeah,
Albert. I think he is in the room. I'm schwitzing for my depression and anxiety has lifted because of my shame.
That's okay.
I thought I had such a good Buttigieg joke.
Just to like jump in with shame with you, can I make an Alex Morse joke that I think Michael would have appreciated?
Yes, but also vote for Alex, Massachusetts.
Of course, Alex is great, and defend Alex, and he's going to be a great representative.
Absolutely.
I just want to say, I'm not going to say. We'll save it for the post game.
Okay. Hi, Albert.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Well, not good, but we say that.
Sure.
It's the old how are you? Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, of course. I'm always happy to talk about all sorts of stuff. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you considering me.
Yeah. I just want to kind of give our audience a little bit of history to what happened in our neighborhood, what happened to your family, and what kind of brought us together. So please correct me if I, mix up any dates or information. But on, I believe it was July 21st, 2018.
Correct.
I was home in my apartment, and my boyfriend was actually headed to the grocery store. And all of a sudden, our neighborhood was like shaking with helicopters and police cars going, 100 miles an hour down next to an elementary school towards our local Trader Joe's. And there was, reports of, a police chase, and, the suspect crashed his car right by the grocery store, and he ran into the store, and the police shot into a Trader Joe's on a Saturday afternoon. It was a busy store. And I'm shaking and angry that we're having to say this, but Albert's beautiful, incredible sister, who is manager there, Mely, she was murdered by the LAPD. Sorry, I didn't expect to get emotional. I was, at the time, I didn't know Albert, and I was just so devastated for you. And excuse me. So cut to about, a year and a half, 2 years later, my brilliant brother Michael is, making waves on the left and doing his great work. And in classic younger sibling form, I'm thinking about how I can get involved but not be in his shadow or do something, separate. And I started becoming aware of this group. I started seeing these T-shirts, sorry, we're going to get flagged. Fuck the Olympics is what they say. And, it's no Olympics LA. Yeah, great shirts.
Worth it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I start, seeing this group online, and they're just like, they've really catchy, fun, honestly really engaging social media, and it's all of a sudden I'm a total chump. I knew that things maybe weren't great for the athletes, but I had no idea about the scale of the impact that the Olympics had on cities. And so I reached out. And I said, I want to get involved, but most importantly, I want one of these, dope T-shirts. And, I was basically led to Albert's literal front door. And we start just having a conversation about, what got us into activism. I talked about, my background. And then, Albert told me that he had lost a family member, had been murdered by the LAPD. And I kind of had a feeling, because you have a bit of a resemblance to your sister, and I wondered. And you told me that Mely was your sister, and you were on my mind pretty much from that day forth. I had some friends that were hostages during that day in the store, and it's a few blocks from where I live, so it's just something that's weighed heavily on me. And I'm almost done to where our story, the last kind of chapter of Albert and I's story together. But on Sunday, July 19th of this year, Albert, in the middle of this pandemic, in the middle of this uprising, organized this beautiful march for Mely. Hundreds of, if not, I don't know, it was a huge turnout. Everyone was holding sunflowers, and our community came together, and it was really wonderful. And Albert spoke, his niece spoke, his brother spoke, your father, Mely's father, spoke. And after the protests, I just felt this anxiety. Like, I really wanted to speak with Michael. I'd seen Albert, and I just felt so overwhelmed by the idea of losing a sibling. It's just so intense. And I called Michael, and we ended up speaking for an hour and a half on FaceTime, because, I'd been at this march and had all these emotions come up. And then, we said goodnight, and less than 12 hours later, in that ballpark, Michael had passed. So, Albert, you've been on my mind. I know this was quite the introduction, and we haven't even touched on all the amazing work you've been doing on the ground. We'll get there. But first, I just wanted to just kind of have a conversation about, our wonderful siblings and their impacts on us as we continue to live and try and live up to honoring their memories. So do you, Albert.
Well, I mean, I first want to say, obviously, and I've sort of reached out to you before this interview just to say how awful it is that you lost Michael, and it's unfortunate that we know the pain that the other person's going through, and to see you, I can see myself in you, and how it's only been a little over a month, and I know that this is the worst time. It's the time of the shock. It's a time of trying to adjust to everyday life, and so to see you doing this, and even just so quickly trying to continue his legacy and what he was about, and like keep this work going, I think is incredible. So I just want to commend you on that, because myself, after a month after Mely was killed, I was a complete mess, and so I don't know that I would have been able to keep it together. So just want to say that. But yeah, I mean, it's been a little over 2 years, and I took a long time to go to therapy and to try to get my mind right, and I knew that I wanted to get involved somehow. Funny enough, I had seen these No Olympics posters like a month after Mely was killed. And they were these missing posters, because our mayor, Eric Garcetti, over here is...
We love him.
Right, yeah. Great guy. He was always going out of town during those days. He was always I think 1 out of every 3 days he was somewhere else. And the rumor was that he was trying to run for president, so he was trying to build support. And whatever the case was, he missed Mely's funeral. And he was gone for most of that week between he was there the night of the shooting, went away for a few days after, and he missed Mely's funeral. And so that always kind of upset me, and it really upset my father. And so I remember seeing these missing posters, and it said No Olympics LA. And I just remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. And just seeing that, that was my first peek into the activist world, into this world of organizing and all that sort of stuff. And so then when I was finally able to start to come out and do stuff, I was like, I will go see what those No Olympics people are all about, because I mean, I definitely had some weird feelings about the Olympics, but I mean, also, and I've told the two co-chairs, Ann and Johnny, that I had to go check it out because they messaged around Mely's murder, and I felt so grateful to that. And it was, so
you felt like the government, the Eric Garcetti's missing, and the people that stepped up were these local organizers. Albert, if it's cool, because we talk a lot on this show about police brutality, and we talk a lot about the victims of these murders and the system, but if you're comfortable and you'll go here with me, do you mind just kind of going back to what happens when a family member is murdered by a police department? What does that look like? What did anyone reach out to you? Was there any effort, any sort of apology? What happens after you lose a family to police brutality and violence in America?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak from obviously my own experience, and I was living in Minneapolis at the time, and my dad was here. So when he told me that when I got the word that Mely had been killed, that she was dead, he knew it was the cops, and everyone there knew it was the cops. Obviously, the police knew, the people inside that store knew, and even that night, you were seeing there was some confusion about who fired the fatal shot. Whose bullet was it? Even though the police knew it was their shot, their bullet, and they went ahead and told the LA Times that it was the suspect who was running away from them. The reason they shot into the store is that it was one of his bullets. And so what ended up happening was we were in touch with Chief Moore, but the only reason we were in touch with him is because he spoke to my father right after Mely was killed, offered apologies, all that sort of stuff. But we were trying to go and see Mely's body because we hadn't seen it yet. And so we had to call. We were literally on the phone with Eric Garcetti and Chief Moore and a bunch of people from LAPD and the coroner's office trying to see Mely's body. And they were not letting us. And I remember speaking to Chief Moore on the phone, and he said, we're going to do everything we can to get you whatever information you need. You'll be able to see your sister soon, but maybe not today. And we just said, this isn't good enough. We don't, they were basically trying to get us out of their way. They were trying to already do the damage control because they knew at some point they were going to have to admit that it was one of their bullets. So they were trying to do whatever they could to kind of get us out of their way. And so what ended up happening is we finally got through to someone who let us see Mely. But the moment that I got home the next day, we decided that we were going to sue the LAPD, that we were going to sue the city because we knew that it was their bullet. And we knew that even if they had come out and said it was us, we're sorry, whatever, it doesn't matter. What they did was a crime, and they committed a terrible act that killed my sister. But then seeing that they were trying to already remove the culpability from themselves and trying to spin it and tell the paper of record in the city that it was someone else's bullet, we knew that, literally the 2 days later, that Monday, we went to a family friend who is a lawyer, and we said, hey, we're going to sue the city. This is what happened. Connect us with people who you think are going to be helpful. And so, and then as soon as we got lawyers, every bit of communication was done through our lawyers in the LAPD. And that's when they that was the end of any sort of goodwill or any of them reaching out. They knew that we were coming.
It was done.
Them. Yeah. And we didn't file for 4 months, but they knew that was coming down the pipeline at some point.
So that was 2 years ago. Where does that stand now? Are you able to speak about that? It's okay if you don't want to go there.
No, that's fine. We filed in November of 2018. We had our first, preliminary hearing in March of 2019. We've had a few since then. We're finally around the 1 year mark. We're able to get Mely's autopsy released to us because what they did too was put a security hold on Mely's autopsy. And what they also did was run a toxicology test on Mely, the victim of a murder. The victim, she was not running from police. She was not in police custody. She wasn't trying to do a suicide by cop, whatever these people try to say. She was at work and thought what she heard was a car accident and went to help someone. So they went ahead and did that because the way that I think about it is that if they found anything, whether Mely was smoking weed or had cough syrup, that would have
been the narrative,
right? That
even if you're shot at work and everyone in the neighborhood adores you and you're this beacon of light, the amount of people that have come forth, that would become the story.
Yeah, and so we finally kept fighting and we have some good lawyers, and so finally at a certain point it was kind of we're just going to keep doing discovery. We're going to take depositions because we found out that there was a videotape that was inside the Trader Joe's that shows what happened. And when we looked at that videotape, it actually was missing 5 seconds of
really?
Footage. Yes. And so
you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah. And so right now we're in the midst of taking depositions from people from Trader Joe's and LAPD, trying to figure out the chain of custody, because what happened was LAPD took the original SIM card from Trader Joe's, made a copy, gave that copy to Trader Joe's, then Trader Joe's gave that to us. And so we've got a copy of a copy that has 5 seconds missing. And I haven't seen the video because it does show Mely get shot, but our lawyers tell us that it gets a little choppy and weird. And so it's definitely been tampered with. And so
Isn't it funny how the in the movie version of what this hellish reality, it's so predictable. Mm-hmm. It's
they're a bunch of clowns.
The writing is so bad.
Yeah. And the thing is they do all this dumb stuff. They're bumbling, they're idiots, they're cowards and all that. But they also just get away with this stuff. Bad,
they don't have to be good because it's just scot-free no matter what.
Right, because of everything from qualified immunity to whatever. And so, so right now we are, I'm not sure if it's going to hold to this, but we were supposed to start our trial in March of 2021. So almost 3 years after Mely was killed is when our trial will start. Because of COVID, we think it's probably going to get pushed back. But and that's why, that was the reason why I decided to get involved, because I knew that what I could do on the streets and getting into activism and organizing was going to be, have a way more immediate response than waiting to sit in a courtroom and see what the decision was. At this point, obviously I want to win the trial and I want it to go, but I just it doesn't really, it's not as important to me anymore, because I know that I can circumvent stuff and go after the LAPD and their union and their supporters and whoever else in a way more direct way through social media and protests and all that stuff.
Absolutely. So do you mind, do you mind me sharing that what happened in your neighborhood when you left LA was you lived a few blocks over from where George Floyd was murdered?
Correct. Yeah.
So, this is becoming, Albert, you're a citizen in this country, and within your life, you've already, lived down the street from a gruesome police murder and also a family member's murder by the police. This is becoming just the scale of the harm of this is consuming us, and it's even people who think there may be can be spared from it, the group that is safe, I think, is becoming a smaller and smaller margin, honestly. So anyways, I'm going on a tangent. When you shared with me that had happened in your neighborhood once you had left LA, and then that's just it's worth saying, because I think personal stories really drive home the reality of what's happening day to day in America. But let's get into your work with No Olympics. Please tell our listeners and our watchers about what No Olympics does, and let's just get clear about the impact the Olympics has, because I, a fairly politically aware person, did not understand the scale and the damage and the repercussions and the labor. Right now, SoFi, what's the name of the stadium?
SoFi Stadium. Correct.
SoFi Stadium. I was correct, and I doubted myself. It was ruled, and again, correct me if I say anything incorrectly, but it was deemed essential labor. There's been horrible COVID outbreaks. At least one worker died falling from a high beam. So this is just the beginning of the 2028 saga in Los Angeles, and this doesn't even touch on housing, quadrupling the police budget and all the other ramifications of hosting these events. So, tell us about No Olympics, what the mission is, and how people can get involved globally.
Yeah, No Olympics LA, we are a coalition that sprang out of DSA LA. And, our main goal is to stop the 2028 Olympics from coming here. When Eric Garcetti took office in 2017, the first thing he did was rubber stamp at the time 2024 Olympics. Has now been changed to 2028. But our goal is to not only educate people about why we don't want them to come to LA, and and that's from everything from providing context, like what happened to LA in the run up to the 84 games and directly after, and then even leading up to the 92 uprising. There is a straight line that can be drawn from the 84 Olympics to that.
To the Rodney King event.
The Rodney King, to then increased policing, economic distress, it's gentrification, it's displacement, and all that. So we try to educate people on, this 2-week party is basically what it is for the elites. This Olympic thing that people seem to think that it's because it's been around a long time, because it's every few years, it's some special thing that we need because it's pageantry. It's an honor for your city to be chosen. And what we have realized, and what many people have realized before us, is that what the Olympics does to a host city is everything from rapidly gentrify a neighborhood, displace tons of people, drive people into homelessness, and what it also does, and the thing that I always kind of stick on is that it bolsters local police forces and it militarizes them, because they're given new surveillance, new weapons. Usually it comes with a partnership with the federal government. If it's depending on where the town is, there's border patrol, there's homeland security. And so they're working in tandem with local law enforcement to clean up cities, quote unquote. Right. And that's everything from doing sweeps of unhoused people and trying to get them out of the eyes of the camera. And like one of the, I think it was the 96 Olympics in Atlanta, they gave a lot of unhoused people one-way bus tickets and said, you can have a bus ticket, but you can't come back here. They tear down very old favelas in Brazil. They tear down 58,000 trees in Pyeongchang to make room for a ski resort for, an Olympic event. And so, we not only are trying to stop the 2028 Olympics from coming here, we want to tell people that any city that's going to get them, whether it's Paris in 2024 or any other city, is going to suffer a lot of consequences, and a lot of people are going to be displaced, and a lot of people are going to die. And something like a SoFi Stadium that already is in Inglewood, which is an already, affected community by the Forum, by all these housing developers, is now just, they're going to be more and more displaced as time goes on. And so we not only want them out of LA, we don't want them anywhere. We want them to be completely abolished. And that's why we have a very strong transnational solidarity with people in London, in France, in all over the world, because just because we kick them out of LA doesn't mean that it's cool that they're somewhere else. And
Right.
And
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I just want to say, because I think this was my first question, which was, what about the athletes? Does this screw the athletes? And if you look into it, it's a labor nightmare for the athletes. There's horrific, abuse and people being underpaid and being unhoused and being athletes. If you want to delve into what this looks like for the athletes, this is not a good deal for the athletes either. So I know sometimes people, I myself included, when you first hear, no Olympics, you think, oh no, what happens to all that that way out, that athleticism. The other thing I just wanted to say was a statistic, and I believe that there's something like a decade before and a decade after. Whenever a city hosts the Olympics, the legislation, oftentimes the bills that are passed around zoning and building new structures and stadiums, unhouse people for those 20 years on either side. So in East London, I think artists are still being knocked out of houses, and they're still using the bills and laws that were passed when London hosted the Olympics to displace and unhouse people. And in Tokyo, I believe that almost everyone, did they have presidents, or is it
Prime Minister,
yeah. Is running on almost all of them except for one are running on a No Olympics platform.
Yeah.
So the reach of this and the knowledge is building. I think this is maybe a bit of an optimistic realm in terms of education and people linking this to abuse of labor in many realms and all the other social injustices that we suffer under capitalism. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I think lots of times the first question is people completely from the right place think, oh no, the athletes. And then I got carried away.
No, but it's okay, because I mean, what I love about No Olympics and just the anti-Olympic platform is that it encompasses so many things, that so many abuses of whether it's human rights or labor. It covers so many things. If you're into housing justice, you can take a look at what it does to neighborhoods. They promise all sorts of stuff. They promise transit, that the transit's going to be better, and it's only ever transit that is going to be used by tourists from the airport or to the Olympic Village, which normally are in parts of town that are very rich. So it's not like they're doing anything for transit in parts of town that actually need them, in marginalized communities for the working class. It's never that. It's building more hotels, because right now in LA they're saying we have a hotel shortage, if you can even believe that that's a phrase that exists. But if you want to defund the police, if you want to abolish the police, then if you're thinking about the Olympics, you draw the line that anytime they come to a city, they are given, their budgets are increased, they have to hire more officers. They're given, and when the federal government gives them new surveillance and new weapons, they don't take them back when the Olympics are over. That is there. So if you look at in the 80s, some of these drug raids that were going on through Operation Hammer that the LAPD did, some of them had Olympic branded battering rams. Wow. So the effects of the Olympics are not just gone after 2 weeks. They are felt for many, many years. And I think Montreal in 1976 was stuck with a $1.5 billion deficit that took them 30 years to pay back. And so it really doesn't have any benefit except for the elites and and even the athletes. I mean, not everyone is Michael Phelps. Not everyone is Michael Jordan or whatever. Most of them live in poverty.
Not everyone's a Michael across the board in all spheres, right? I guess.
Yeah. No, and they have to work these rigorous workouts while living in poverty, while Henry Kissinger, as part of the IOC, gets paid $900 a day in per diem to go and sleep in the stands. So from top to bottom, however you want to attack the Olympics, there's a way for you to plug in if you're a housing advocate or a police abolitionist. If we get rid of the Olympics, we're dealing a major blow to a lot of these machines that
yes, it's emblematic of a lot of different areas that people are diligently kind of looping back to the conversation we had earlier, getting involved in the local sphere. I encourage people to, do you want to shout out some socials?
At No Olympics LA on Twitter. We're No Olympics LA on Instagram. Check us out. We have teach-ins. I'm one of the new member liaisons. So if you want to get involved and we can kind of steer you because we doing everything from making a documentary to doing research to doing social media blasts to, I mean, just a good old fashioned trolling, going after the LA 2028 social media accounts that just launched, and we're trying to hold protests by SoFi Stadium and bring attention to Inglewood and what they're going through right now, because that is a city that is rapidly changing and is only going to get worse because that stadium is going to be built and the Rams and the Chargers are going to play there, and a ton of music acts are going to come through there, and it's just going to become less and less a historically black enclave, and it's just going to become shopping centers and a place for the rich to do their thing, and we can't let that happen. And really, we're at a time where like the world is changing, and we can have some say in it. And if that means destroying the Olympics, if that's the only thing I ever do with my life, I'll have lived.
Well done.
And listen, this is all informed, and to kind of take it back to Michael and Mely. This is my journey through this life of activism and organizing is informed by Mely. I want to do good for this world because Mely's last conscious action was to go help someone who she thought was in a car accident. Right. So like, if that's how you go out, then that's how I got to go out too.
Beautiful.
Is you got to go help people, even if you don't know what the result of that is going to be. Because Mely had no idea what was going on. She had no idea there was cops there, that they were going to be shooting, and she went anyway. And so for me, that's like, I got to keep doing this. And whether that's police abolition or mutual aid or canvassing for Nithya Raman or whatever, like this is what it's all about. Ultimately, this is why so many people get into this work, is because they feel a need to right some wrongs. And nothing will ever bring back Mely, and unfortunately won't ever bring back Michael. But as long as we keep the fight up, then we can at least say that we did right by them,
Absolutely. Yeah. And we tried to do something in all that beautiful life and potential that was robbed, Yeah. So,
yeah, for sure.
And I also just, because TMBS, we have such an amazing global community, and the Olympics is such a global problem. This is a good thing for activists to be aware of in all cities, and it can be such a beautiful global community of resistance. And Albert, I think I did not anticipate how our fates would kind of be thrust together when I showed up at your door asking for a T-shirt, a few months back, and.
Yeah.
I just appreciate your friendship. I'm inspired by your activism, and Mely had a beautiful heart. I always just kind of had like almost like parasocial, just like waving. I would see her at Trader Joe's. Everyone just had such a I don't know, pure heart chakra, just kind of emulated from her, and I feel that from you too. And I hope we can continue to have conversations about not just activism, but also just the pain of losing someone, and in your circumstance, really being robbed of that from an institution in our society. And I'm just so sorry, and I will continue to do work for Michael, but also, we will all here on this platform and this project continue to fight for Mely and all the people that have been, murdered by the police in this country. And we must put an end to that. That is, we cannot continue this way.
Hey, we're going to do it. It's just, it's going to take some time and some effort, but we're on our way. And, like I said before, I'm really sorry for what happened, but I'm glad to have you in the fight. And we just got to do it for them,
All right. Much love.
All right,
see you in LA.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey,
those examples of those lying with impunity about Mely's case.
Freaking the missing 5 seconds. It's so lame.
It's really.
It's like, really?
I mean, it's like I was prefacing the thing. Like, I just don't trust it. I'm sorry. Every single thing needs to be corroborated by an independent source, because they lie just with impunity, and it's so menacing. And it's something with we talk about what the service of this show is. I think it's. To see that happen constantly, it's nice to just appreciate with others that that's happening, right? Like that they are just lying about these things, and I don't know. It's terrifying how clumsy they can be and how clumsy they feel empowered to be, because they just operate and lie with impunity, murder with impunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm so inspired by Albert and, his family just really stepping up and getting involved. So, he didn't even mention he does a lot of stuff with, unhoused organizations but the fact that we're even here having this conversation, the fact that we're even having to discuss this missing 5 seconds, it honestly makes me ill. It's just, it cannot continue. I know it sounds like a little naive, a little like Pollyanna, but it truly is just, things have gone just so bad.
No, it needs a massive intervention into cop lying and public trust, because that's what fundamentally all these things are about. Is they forfeited over and over and over again the trust of the communities that they are murdering in.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well,
we're gonna get dinged for this episode.
What'd you say? We're gonna get dinged?
I think actually, like, it's the effort, or if you just talk about like cops and murder and the same thing. I think
they go wild.
Fucking cop murders.
Exactly. But what won't get us dinged is the Griscom economic minute. We need to,
let's get to that.
We need
gem,
to find a
honey.
way. We need to find a way to like transition this segment into like some sort of algorithm where it thinks it's like with CNBC content, like delivering to like guys who just want trading tips and stuff.
That would
on
be
YouTube.
hilarious.
Yeah,
that would
stay
be
till the end to get trading tips.
Because I tell you what they're doing.
Okay.
And where the money's going. So this story, and if you have this ready, I don't need it up now, but if you have it ready to go on the screen later.
Here it is right now.
It's just something, that I wanted to talk about. So this was a story that just came out of the New York Times called Big Oil's in Trouble. Its plan, flood Africa with plastic. Highly suggest people taking the time to read this if they have access to it. But Kenya, which is one of Africa's largest economies, has really led the way in pushing back against plastic waste and like harsh punishment too, including jail time for people who are breaking their plastic bag ban. Kenya also recently banned single-use plastics in national parks. And importantly for the story and for our relationship with the United States relationship with Kenya, in 2017, Kenya has come out and basically said that they signed a pledge with a few other countries to say that they're actually going to stop importing plastic waste. And the reason this story is important is because you have a country like Kenya, a major economic hub in Africa, trying to push back against the wasteful plastics industry that are polluting the planet. But right now, as Kenya and the United States are negotiating a trade deal, one which the president has indicated that he's very keen to sign, there has been a very frightening proliferation of fuel industry lobbyists pushing for Kenya to reverse its bans on plastics and on importing wastes. And this information came from an FOIA request by Unearthed, which is a UK-based environmental group. Now, obviously, we can just see on a moral level why this is a problem, but the money is something that we really need to focus on. We talked about this year, the complete collapse of the price of oil and the difficulty that these fossil fuel companies are having with dealing with a new reality where, one, they have this massive loss in the price of oil today, but also, the fear that people are going to wake up and fight back against climate change and move to more renewable sources of energy. So there has been a massive reinvestment from American oil companies, fossil fuel companies, into the production of plastics. In this decade alone, fossil fuel companies in the United States have pursued plastic spending in the area of $200 billion. So there's been a massive refitting of this whole industry to, instead of using that oil or what they get even from fracking, to use to power cars or gasoline, to actually start producing plastics on a massive scale. Now, the United States is already oversaturated with plastics, and people are really opting to use less. We still have a problem, but the trend is down. So these companies are really focusing on trying to now flood markets in other countries with single-use plastics, and also in general, the United States is trying to ship out all of our plastic waste. As you see countries like China, who is no longer accepting plastic trash, and they've been taking the American trash for a very long time, there's going to be more and more pressure on countries like Kenya and countries in the developing world to start absorbing this massive waste from the American economy. So as we see this shift, from from drilling for oil production to now drilling for plastic production. There's going to be more and more fights that have to, be had. And also the recognition that the United States is using its ability as, the most powerful trading partner in the world, to basically force other countries against the will of the people who said, we do not want to pollute our countries, to basically force them into accepting American trash, and then also into, accepting single-use plastic, which we all know is absolutely devastating for the environment. Kenya too, in this circumstance, is like the rest of the world, is suffering dramatically under COVID, making the acceptance of this deal more and more likely. And just to zoom out for a second, this is the kind of fights that we have to be aware are happening all across the board. As we were talking about with Malaika, what happens is you have these massive lobbyist organizations who start to give information and they start to give out pre-written, statements and text that will go into a trade agreement to American trade representatives. And oftentimes that language ends up almost directly in the trade agreements. We've seen it with the massive, the new NAFTA 2.0, that these organizations have a lot of power to drive policy, and they do it behind the shadows. They do it, one, because you have a nasty, horrible capitalist regime under Donald Trump, but they also do it because these are massive deals that cover a lot of different, topics and are binding for both countries, right? So it's a great way to actually undercut even American regulations as well. So this is something that we need to be, paying a lot of attention to. Obviously, it hits everything that, we need to be focused on: climate change, capitalism, and neo-imperialism. But definitely, something that I'm going to keep my eye out, and hope everyone out there does too.
I'm old enough to remember when plastics were the original petroleum-based environmental hazard that we were spoken against. It was like, turtles with the six-pack thing around.
Now it's the masks. Have you seen that? The mask loops are getting in animals. There's like a huge mask gloves pandemic on top of the epidemic pandemic.
I guess I shouldn't say it went away just because we started focusing on carbon emissions and climate change, but as we have this giant island of floating trash in the middle of the ocean.
But these are massive industries, and they're realizing that their profit models threatened, typical production. So that's why they're focusing so much on plastic right now, because even though it's visceral when you see plastic waste, obviously, but it is something that we're especially in the United States, are just so used to seeing. Right. That's a market that, and then more importantly, it's a market that they can export to the rest of the world, which is not as reliant on plastic waste as Americans are. Right. But this is the kind of thing that we have to watch in the long term. Obviously, this story with Kenya, but look at what the fossil fuel industry is doing. They are adept and understand that, okay, people might be, driving less or might be using, renewable energy. They're going to find ways to continue to extract oil and then to turn it into, plastic products. They're just finding different ways to sell the product that is damaging to the environment in general.
It feels just like a dizzying game of keeping up in every lane.
I feel like one way we could make it fun is if we put little touches like this is a wartime radio, and just really...
It does feel like when I was talking to Albert, I felt like we're in our bunkers being they're out there killing people.
It really felt like way. I remember right after Trump won feeling that, and then after a few months you're being a bit hysterical, and then now it's no.
I thought you were gonna say you're being a little bitch.
No. That's for the post game, I guess.
Okay, sorry.
I will do that. I will do
Jump
the
gun.
Morris.
Yeah, people in the chat are saying they better be worth the $8, Matt. So the pressure.
Yeah, you have to take up.
I'll just say it. I'll just say it now. This was meant. I imagine saying this in sort of like a right-wing Mandela voice, where he sort of embraced resistance, liberal homophobia. But it's it was reported that he was the first person to vote in his polling place this morning, the very first person in line. And I imagine right-wing Mandela saying that's because he was out clubbing all night.
It's good.
I liked it. I thought there was an actual scandal around the voting. No. I was on the edge of my seat.
No actual scandal. I think he just he's civically engaged. I think is the
scandal is he voted.
Yeah, exactly. So go, Alex. Do we actually have any? I don't know. Have we?
It's super early. I've seen it jump. We're at that 1 to 2% level where I don't think it's as worthwhile delving into that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I've been scarred by this stuff so much. I think over the past 5 years I really don't like to do.
And is Mass a big? Is it easy to vote remotely? Early voting and mail.
I haven't voted in Mass since the Obama administration.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. I would imagine that Massachusetts has a pretty decent mail system too, mail voting system. So it might be a little while, but we'll keep our eyes on that in the post game for everybody.
More titillating.
People are saying my joke wasn't worth $8. So anyway,
yeah, I was worried because I think that the price tag got it. I think it was the other day I made a joke with you guys, and I was sitting on it for a minute, and then when I delivered it, just the air wasn't there. The joke is solid. It just the thinking of it, it takes the air out.
Yeah. All right, folks.
I think it was worth $8, people.
Yeah. Well, we'll brush up here.
I'll be a Matt stan.
What do we want to tease in the post game, folks? While I start playing this,
I'll be giving comedy tips.
We have.
That's a good business model. Is comedy.
Be like, you don't want to lose your air. If you lose the air, you lose the bit.
We have Amazon's new spying program. Maybe if we're feeling up to it, we can jump into Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's new Nintendo-based campaign strategy, and much, much more, and also some Discord questions too.
All right.
We'll see you there.
All right, folks.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah. All right. Let me just sign out there. But yeah, patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks you everybody. We like the viewer numbers, how they've stayed up with us for these live shows. We love being here with you as much as you love being here with us. And
David's going to get a gap in the post game to match Matt and I. That's what's happening in the post game.
Yeah.
Oral surgery live.
Mind the Gap radio. Yeah. Anyway, see you folks.
See y'all.